This video comes on the back of another video I did recently about collecting whiskey. If you didn't see that, I gave 10 awesome tips on how to collect whiskey for your enjoyment, whether that be for collecting or drinking. And I will leave a link here. Okay, so now that you have your whiskey collected and ready for whatever you want to do with it yourself, do you have a place to store it? Is there even a right way to store whiskey so it won't go off or get damaged? Does it go off? Does it get damaged? Let's find out. Welcome to Whiskey and Whiskey. I'm the Whiskey Chaser Brian here in Christys Bar Kilkenny, the home of Irish whiskey. So yeah, what's the deal? Storing whiskey. Is this a thing? Isn't it a thing? Why bother? I'll just leave it on my shelf. I'm sure that's fine, right? Right? Now for you, the wonderful people of YouTube, I have scoured the internet in the lead up to this video to try and find a number of scientifically led points on storing whiskey because science. But in reality, there's only really 3 or maybe at a push 4 things to concern yourself with. I could try and stretch this to 6, but they all basically fall under 3 or 4 talking points. So in other words, this won't be a long video, but extremely important. Now there are 2 categories here of storage, one for bottles that you haven't opened yet that is awaiting imminent drinkage, and bottles that are opened and being drank, so pay attention. First and foremost, people, number 1, starting at the top, please, for the love of all things mighty, do not, under any circumstances, store your whiskey bottles on the side. That, my friends, is a huge no-no. This is not wine, this is whiskey. Whiskey is notoriously higher in ABV than wine. This should not be new information to you. A higher ABV spirit will erode the cork stopper. That's right, the cork will eventually completely disintegrate, allowing air in, which in turn will oxidize the whiskey, rendering it completely useless, flavorless, and nothing but a lethal, but pretty, doorstop. Now that is not to say, however, that the whiskey in the bottle should never touch the cork. In fact, you need to bring the whiskey into contact every few months or so with the cork. So store it like this, every so often, turn like that for a second or 2, and what this does is lubricates the cork and stops it from completely drying out. You see, a cork is impermeable to liquid, but slightly permeable to gases. So this helps stop air sneaking in around the sides and oxidizing that whiskey. Do yourself a favor, turn the bottles every once in a while, a little bit that way, back up, once every 3 or 6 months, and keep them stored. Whoops, like that. Actually, truth be told, there's no real truth to that. I did Google it. Apparently there is enough interactions going on inside the bottle with the gases and humidity and expansion and evaporation that the cork is always slightly damp anyway. So there's no real scientific proof that tilting it on its side actually does anything for the whiskey. So do what you want, but I would say, do you really want to tempt fate? Do you? Tempt it or don't, your call. I turn mine, sometimes, when I remember. The second and quite possibly the most hugely important point on this list is to keep your whiskey bottles out of sunlight. Direct exposure to sunlight or other intense light sources is the #1 enemy of whiskey. True. When left exposed, chemical reactions will start to occur inside the liquid that will degrade its quality. This is very obvious in whiskey that has some of that E150A caramel coloring in it. But it's not really as apparent in colored whiskeys that get its natural coloring from the cask. So more so in falsely colored whiskeys, not so much in cask colored whiskeys naturally. If you leave them in front of a window, it can pretty much alter the color in as little as 4 to 8 weeks. The UV rays actually break down the molecules and give the whiskey its washed out color. This causes most of the flavor compounds and aroma of the whiskey to get dull. It can break down alcohol, esters. The liquid itself isn't the only one spoiled by direct sunlight, as both the cork and labels are also heavily affected by the rays. So what you basically want to do is mimic a cellar. At all costs, keep the whiskey out of sunlight. UV rays also affect the tannins in whiskey. I said flavors there earlier, but as well as tannins. Discolor obviously, and it wreaks havoc on labels. Careful what light you're using also. When storing or showing off your collection, they say museum quality lighting is good. It won't affect the labels as bad. As a general rule, the everyday LED lamp is not really so good. It can cause up to double the rate of fading of a UV filtered quartz halogen lamp. If you are showing off the collection at some stage, or you have a collection, try using a high-grade LED or quartz halogen lamp or museum-grade fluorescent lamps. Number 3, and probably something you knew anyway, protect from humidity and fluctuating temperature. High humidity damages labels. You also, on the flip side to that, can't have it too dry either. Too dry can cause evaporation within the bottle. So it should be kept in a temperature controlled area. Mild summers and winters, you're good. Extreme fluctuations, not so good. Whiskey expands and contracts, hence the headspace in the bottles, which is between the fill line and actually the cap. You know, it's that gap between the fill line and the cork. That's what I was trying to say. That's headspace, and it's designed to allow whiskey to move a little, fluctuate. Now, small fluctuations, okay. Big fluctuations can damage the cork and allow air in when the alcohol pushes up against the cork from expansion. Hello, oxidization. Aim for about 15 to 20 degrees Celsius, which is approximately 59 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit. And if you can, seal capsules and tops with parafilm. If you're not sure what parafilm is, it's a semi-permeable cling film type wrap made of paraffin wax. That's obviously, stronger than cling film, but when it's doubled over on itself and you wrap it a few times, it actually creates an impermeable seal. It's so good that even gases can't get in or out, and it flexes around the ridges of the cap of the bottle of whiskey. So do this along with avoiding heat fluctuations and you're good. Side note here, not really part of the main list, but I'm gonna say it anyway, don't freeze your whiskey. Freezing your whiskey bottles won't cause any permanent harm. However, the flavors will be dull if you directly drink a freezing cold whiskey, especially the expensive ones. They're best kept at room temperature. If you enjoy colder whiskey, you can add a little ice cube at room temperature to give it a quick chill, or one of those whiskey cube thingies, just to kind of bring the temperature back up to normality. Or down. Now, a few points you will want to consider if you have a nice amount of bottles open at any one time, like myself. Whiskey does go off. Try restrict the number of open bottles because whiskey will oxidize inside of an open bottle, which will gradually dull its taste. So consuming it within a few months will ensure that you are enjoying it at its peak. Be disciplined and keep open only the number of bottles you can finish within roughly a 4 to 5 month period to optimize your freshest pours. As a general rule of thumb, if a whiskey bottle is approximately 2/3-ish full, you have roughly a year to year and a half, at a max push 2 years before it goes off, because the oxygen in the bottle will degrade it. Which brings me to another point here. Limit oxygen's influence. Once a bottle is open, oxygen is already acting like a dickhead. If you've got bottles that you aren't going to finish for months, consider decanting them into smaller sample size bottles like 100 or 150 ml and limit the amount of oxygen that gets into the bottle. I even read somewhere that it's a thing to pump in inert gases into the bottle to preserve the whiskey. You could do that, or kill the bottles quickly. Get them done, drink them, take your notes and move on. Don't leave them sit. You will regret it. Drink them, finish them, get rid of them. Make some space on your shelf for more drinking whiskey. So there you have it. A few key points on storing whiskey for the long term and short term. I told you this wasn't going to be a long video. Let me know if you've encountered any problems before with the above by leaving a comment below. I'd love to hear a good story or two. I myself am the victim of breaking 1 or 2 corks in my lifetime. So to sum up and in short, store bottles upright, not on the side, out of sunlight, in a temperature controlled moderate climate. If you can, use parafilm. And any open bottles, drink them and enjoy them and then clear them out. That's my summary in a nutshell. Now, if you will excuse me, I myself have some serious January clearing out to do. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and keep an eye on the channel. Make sure you keep it Irish, and we'll see you next week. Sláinte.